This is a one-season review of the new Maven RF.1 rangefinder. I received a pre-release version of the rangefinder last year to evaluate and review. This is an unpaid review. The thoughts presented are my own, and I do need to return this unit after I finish filming. Though it was a pre-release version, I did handle production unit at the Iowa Deer Classic this spring to confirm that nothing was wildly different. The size of the RF.1 is similar to other rangefinders, with the primary difference being the inclusion of a small dial protruding from the left side. In a fairly tight rangefinder pocket sleeve, that could cause some challenges, but in a looser fitting pocket or pouch, or if used in a minimalist style harness like the Rick Young Bino harness that I've typically used for deer hunting, it's not really an issue, especially as a lefty. Though if you do have it on your right side, that dial will be against your side. It's a trade-off that deviates from a more streamlined shape, but by doing so, it allows you to adjust some features without having to go into the menu system. The magnesium and aluminum construction feels high quality and polished. The knurling on the focus ring makes it easy to use, and the multi-position eye cup blocks light from the sides and makes for a quick and consistent visual acquisition. The RF.1 also does have a 1/4-20 tripod thread on the bottom. Optically, the 7x25 system is pretty good. Low light is not as good as, say, like a larger Eggsy pupil binocular like a quality 7x45 or 8x42, but you wouldn't really expect it to be. In comparison to some other similarly priced rangefinders that I've used, Optical Quality is a touch better, though they are 6x22 that I'm comparing to. A more apples to apples comparison would be something like the Vortex Razor HD 4000. I also haven't experienced any issues with this rangefinder with fogging. Some of the unique features on this rangefinder are more on the actual range finding side of things. The max advertised distance is 4,500 yards for a reflective target. I can see how that would be useful out west, which is likely also a reason that they included those tripod threads in the bottom. In flatter land where I live, it was a challenge to even find something in the woods over 2,000 yards to even test. Animal ranges are advertised at 2,700 yards, and it's safe to say that the range is going to be more than adequate for any basic whitetail scenario. And while you might think to yourself that these ranges are just way overkill, another thing to remember is that they do indicate a little bit stronger ranging system. So it'll perform better at short distances as well, especially in adverse lighting conditions. Out west, ultra long ranging could also be useful when you're doing route planning. You can choose from multiple different reticle displays, and you can choose between line of sight and angle compensation modes. Generally, angle compensation is what you can use the majority of the time, especially for whitetail. In really extreme angle and/or distance scenarios, it's generally accepted that you're better off using line of sight and a cut chart or ballistic software. The rangefinder has something called field and forest modes. It's easy to switch between one or the other, and it has to deal with how the rangefinder processes the data to give you the range that you actually want. Field mode, for instance, is useful when you have an object in an open area and you want the rangefinder to pick it out versus missing it and giving you a range that's too far. Forest mode, on the other hand, is useful in heavier cover when you want the rangefinder to ignore what's close, like branches or light grass, and give you the range of what's beyond it. Hunting primarily in thicker cover throughout the fall, I had my rangefinder on forest mode basically 90% of the time, and it works pretty well. Another interesting observation that I had was that in light snow, the forest mode would give an accurate reading, whereas the field mode would really struggle a little bit more. And in really heavy wet snow, both modes struggled, but that's a scenario that most rangefinders are going to struggle in. Regarding the dial on the side, it allows you to quickly adjust the brightness of the display without needing to press buttons or filter through settings. And in some ways that makes it nicer than an auto brightness compensation because you can quickly dial it to the exact look that you want across various lighting scenarios both around you and at the location that you're ranging. I'm left-handed, so ergonomically it's positioned in such a way that it's basically impossible for me to operate it with one hand unless I have the rangefinder hanging at my side. But for a right-handed person, you can easily adjust it while in use using your thumb. I historically like to use the scanning function of rangefinders in actual use to utilize those live updates to ensure that I'm ranging the right thing. If it's bouncing back and forth between, say, 24 and 40 yards, I'd be able to tell that the deer is 40 and that the branch in the foreground is 24. The Maven scan mode is a little bit different though. When you're in field mode, it'll only update to give you a closer distance than you've already ranged. Again, under the assumption that you're trying to range the closer object and ignore the background. In forest mode, it's the opposite. The scan mode will update to give you a farther number, but not a closer number. If it starts reading a closer number than what's already been scanned, it'll ignore it. Again, this strategy is assuming that you want to ignore the foreground noise and get that further reading. Initially, I thought the scan mode was defective until I realized that's how the processing was working. I don't really like it. Sometimes even in the woods, I'll overshoot the animal while still trying to hold the rangefinder steady as possible and need it to come back. In essence, I couldn't really trust it in the woods, so instead of using the scanning feature, I would often just revert to tapping the rangefinder button multiple times to confirm a reading. The official spec on the website is between 1/4 of a second and 3 seconds, just depending on how reflective that target is. Comparing it to something like that SIG 1800 BDX, for instance, there's a pretty drastic difference in readout speed for the scan mode, but I suppose there is some level of personal preference there with how you want that to integrate with the field or forest modes. I'm still on the original CR2 battery, therefore I can't give a good assessment of how long the battery would last other than it's been a year and it's still working. But I would just be putting in a fresh one each season for peace of mind regardless. Price-wise, the RF.1 sells for $400. Overall, there's a lot to like about the Maven RF.1 with optical quality, build quality, and the different ranging modes being key attributes. I'm on the fence about the protruding brightness wheel. If I were right-handed, perhaps I'd enjoy it more. The only main downside for me personally was just the implementation of that scan mode. So I hope this review was helpful. If you do have any questions, please drop them in the comment section down below, and thanks for watching.